Hey, I'm Mark Mears. I'm the founder and chief growth officer for L.E.A.F Growth Ventures, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Welcome to A Productive Conversation. I'm Mike Vardy, and I'm joined on this episode by Mark Mears. He's a #1 best-selling author, keynote speaker, consultant, and visionary business leader. He has a significant track record of building shareholder value with driving innovation and profitable growth among world-class brands such as PepsiCo/Pizza Hut, McDonald's, Frito-Lay, JCPenney, NBC Universal, and The Cheesecake Factory, which we talk about during this conversation. His new book, The Purposeful Growth Revolution, 4 Ways to Grow from Leader to Legacy Builder, is the focus of our conversation today, a productive one at that. So let's get to it, because purpose can really power productivity. It all starts with the story of a tree, but we'll get to that. Here it is, my conversation with Mark Mears. Enjoy. Mark, thanks so much for joining me today. It's funny, whenever I have a conversation with somebody, we were just chatting about, football, our sensibilities around business purpose. We're going to get into that today. Productiveness versus productivity, leadership versus management, all that stuff. But one of the things that I did right out of the gate with you, Mark, was I shared a photo of a plant that, and I'll put this in I'll link to it in the show notes. We'll figure out a way to do that. But you could see the photo of like all of the dead brush beside this plant, and then like this one leaf that's just real, this one plant that's really thriving. And it literally, what's interesting about what I showed you, Mark, was that this plant has now like 5 or 6 leaves on it, and it's going, it's shooting to them, it's taking root and taking hold. And your book, The Purposeful Growth Revolution, 4 Ways to Grow from Leader to Legacy Builder, I wanted you to share why I shared that photo with you, because it's literally one of those things right out of the gate with the book that you talk about, this idea of growth. So Can we get into that right out of the gate?
We certainly can. And I love seeing that plant because, and the fact that my book triggered your thought process makes it now real. Right?
Yeah.
And so often we walk along, and the old adage, sometimes we don't see the forest through the trees. Well, I had an epiphany one day, and now it was February 21st, I think it was 2013. I was living in the Los Angeles area at the time, and that's about the time we start seeing the first signs of spring. And after a life event that I won't go through right now happened, I then took the dog out the next day, and we had a fig tree in our backyard that was barren from the 5 or 6 or 7 weeks of winter that we do get in Southern California. And Mike has got as my witness, as the sun was coming up over the wall in our backyard, it shone on one branch of that fig tree, this tiny little green bud of a leaf just starting to emerge. And it was there I got this epiphany of a leaf is a symbol of growth and rebirth. And I thought back to my high school science days, where we learned about xylem and phloem, and the fact that all growth of a plant or a tree happens through the leaf, through the miracle of photosynthesis. So I got to thinking, I took the dog inside and went into my office. I started banging out a treatment about leaf as a symbol for growth and rebirth. But then in my mind's eye, I also saw there was something missing with the mantra that I had been leading with, this thing called the rule of 3s. If you do 3 things and do them really well, you're going to get the maximum impact. So my mantra was leadership, engagement, and accountability. And if we do those 3 things, the brand I was working for at the time, I was president, and we had a big turnaround in front of us. I said, we're going to turn the brand around. We're going to put a new brand positioning and a new menu, because I was working for a restaurant company, and we're going to achieve our goals. It was leadership, engagement, accountability. So over the course of 2 years, my management team and I and our 10,000 team members and all of our restaurants, we walked by that, and I used it as reward and recognition. And instead of the corporate entity that owned us at the time putting the capital behind us to grow, which is what they promised to do when they recruited me from the Cheesecake Factory as chief marketing officer, they decided to move in a different direction. They decided to sell us. So that moment, that dark moment, that life event I'm talking about came the day after I was let go, and my whole team was wiped out after the new company came in. The deal closed on a Friday. Monday morning at 8 o'clock, I have a meeting with the new CEO, and then I'm out the door. So the thought occurred to me, something was missing in that kind of leadership, engagement, and accountability triumvirate. I now believe in the higher power of fours versus the rule of threes, because what was missing as I looked at that little bud was fulfillment.
Yeah.
That fig tree in my backyard only knows how to be a fig tree, and it fulfills its purpose by bearing fig leaves, where all growth happens, as well as fig fruit. And in that fig fruit, it serves as more than sustenance for people and animals. It has seeds that can then be scattered for future growth. So I started working on this treatment, and the 4-circle Venn diagram now included leadership, engagement, accountability, and fulfillment, all revolving around purposeful growth.
You know, as you were talking about that, I couldn't help but think about Ted Lasso, the show Ted Lasso. You've seen it? Have you seen the Ted Lasso? Have you seen it?
Yes. And by the way, he's from Kansas City.
Yes, I do. I knew that. Barbecue sauce. Which, by the way, my son and I love that. I watched it once, and my son and I watched it together, and he fell in love with it too. But remember in that show, for spoiler alert, everybody, at the end, he talks about the 4 things that they need to do as a team, and they couldn't figure out the 4th thing no one knew what he goes, I don't know what it is, but when we see it, we'll know what it is. I'm not going to tell everybody what it is. You know what it is, Mark. I know what it is because you saw the show. We're going to keep it quiet. You have to go watch the show. But it's interesting because I think there's a commonality there. When you talk about the 4 things, the idea of leadership, engagement, accountability, those are very, for lack of a better term, like they're hard, they're concrete, right? You know what I mean? Like those are things that you could, again, and we talked about before we really started recording, like, I don't like using the term productivity because there's like this hard, very quantifiable kind of superseding quality, this lack of like forsaking quality to a degree, or pushing quality down for the sake of like, hey, we can measure this stuff. It's very easy for us to measure these numbers, et cetera, et cetera. Quality is a little bit trickier, right? When you add fulfillment to the mix, just like when you add, the idea of productiveness, which is a term I like to use because productiveness preceded the term productivity. When we weren't as concerned about making a lot of stuff, we were more concerned about making a good amount of stuff well. So
craftsmanship.
Right. So the Persig talks about this in his book on quality. He talked about it in L.E.A.F, all that stuff. When we talk about fulfillment, and as I went through the book, I noticed that accountability kind of like there was this linkage between accountability and fulfillment how does someone take that fulfillment, especially when they're so used to like measuring numbers and quantifiable stuff? When someone's trying to measure this stuff, fulfillment, is there a way that you feel that fulfillment can be kind of grokked into a measurement tool that somebody who is so used to or working for an organization that is faceless, nameless, that is asking for this, like, we need to see these numbers. How do you kind of make that happen?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. And, I think there's some great statistics that I found to support the idea of purposeful growth, which is my thesis, not just growth, because anything, weed can grow, but that fig tree has a purpose to grow into a fig tree and be the best fig tree it can be. Well, it can only do so if it's planted in the most fertile environment,
right?
A nurturing environment that helps it grow. So my parallel to that is a culture in an organization. Every one of us needs to be in an environment that allows us to grow up into the very best me I can be, or you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you use the word productivity that you didn't like. And so I believe words matter as well. So my thesis is that I want to put the human back in human resources. Right. And to do that, I think all we need is love. Now, not the kind of love that's going to get you a quick call from HR and escort out of the building.
Fair.
But it's an acronym which stands for listen, observe, value, and empower. Until the zombies or the robots or Chat GPT takes us away, we're all still humans, and we all have basic needs, as Maslow told us years ago. We all need to be able to be, feel seen and heard, right? So observing somebody or first of all, listening to them, not only, what they're saying, but even what they're not saying. Through COVID, there was a lot of anxiety, as you can imagine, and there still is, even post-COVID, about whether it's a looming recession, whether it's, inflation, whether it's war, you name it, right? So when we come to work, we're whole people, and we need to feel comfortable being in a place that gives us an environment to be our best self. And there's a lot of talk and a lot of work being done on mental health these days, of stress and anxiety in the workplace. Well, someone is not going to be as, they're not going to be as productive if they're going through stuff that people don't understand. So if you're a leader, not a boss, a leader is a title that you earn every day. A boss is just one that's given to you that people then dutifully salute and execute without any relationship being formed. But a leader wants to form a relationship with their team member, not employee, but someone who physically is a member of a team. And, listening to them as a whole person, I believe there are four kind of areas or realms of service. When I say who you serve is more important than your why. And no offense to Simon Sinek, but I believe we have to start with who. Mm-hmm. And there are four realms of service. There's, relational, spiritual, personal, and professional, right? So we need to be able to be comfortable taking our whole self into the workplace. And if we do, and we understand our purpose, and then we're allowed to grow up into our purpose, it's going to take away a lot of the downside of quiet quitting or the great resignation, which I call the great repurposing. Because I believe COVID gave us all a bit of a time out to reflect deeply on not only what, but who matters most in our lives.
Right.
Let me just throw out a few stats to you.
Sure. This
comes from the science of purpose. Individuals with a connection to their purpose have a 63% increase in wealth, leadership, effectiveness, and fulfillment. They learn twice as much, are 4 times more engaged, and get this, are 175% more productive. That's almost 2 people worth. Now, it goes the other direction with companies having a connection to their purpose, experience higher margins, as purposeful firms have proven to be 30% more innovative. 73% of customers will switch to higher purpose brands and pay more for them. And they're also getting higher levels of retention and tenure and have 54% more fulfilling work relationships. So if you want me to quantify fulfillment, I think I made a pretty good case right there. But let's look at the other thing. What's the cost of having to replace a team member? It's a lot. You got to go back through the whole process of recruiting and identifying and hiring and training and recognize, rewarding, and retaining. And then if that cycle gets broken again, you got to start all over. There are some tremendous costs that are on the balance sheet. I mean, labor, if not cost of goods, one of the two is usually the highest item or line item on a P&L.
It's
right?
also one. It's also it's a controllable too. The problem is that's one of the first things. You're right. Like, I mean, I remember when I worked at Costco, it was like you want to keep your payroll around 33%, no higher, no lower, and 33% is pretty high. Like you want to keep it as low as possible. But the problem is churn can happen. Like, I mean, and for me, really quickly, when I worked in the food court, because that's the area I was in charge of, it was the highest churn area in the building because nobody wanted to work there. Nobody wanted to be serving. They wanted to get out and work on the floor and stuff like that. So what ended up happening? Who ended up having to work more hours? Well, it was me. I had to work a lot. And it was fine. It was fine because at the time, my purpose was I really wanted to be the best. I wanted to have the best run department in the whole building. So that was what filled me at that time. Now keep in mind, I was in my 20s. I didn't have a family, any of that stuff yet. That changed. When that changed, all of a sudden my desire, and what was interesting is it wasn't just my desire to run that department, it was my desire to even work for the company any longer, because I felt like I was being left out in the cold. They're like, well, no, you know, your payroll's too high. We're going to move those people out. So it wasn't even something that I could control. It was something like, we're going to get these people out of here. We're going to bring new people in. You got to train them all over again. And that can become tiresome, and it can drain the very lifeblood of what brought you to the dance in the first place, right?
No, absolutely. And a large chunk of my experience is in restaurant, hospitality, retail, and entertainment. And they're very people-oriented businesses, and they're a lot of hard work. And so you couple that with, you know, long shifts, dealing with people on your feet all day. And it's easy for someone to say, no mas, I'm done, and bounce and go somewhere else where they can get a couple dollars an hour more or whatever. So the point about creating a community, which I believe is a better word than culture, because culture is merely a place you might just feel like you are part of. Mm-hmm. A community is a place you may feel like you belong in.
Right.
So when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we're making some progress, but we need to make a lot more. When you think about it, you know, diversity just gets you in the room, and inclusion gets you a seat at the table, and equity gives you an equal voice. And all those are great, but they don't mean anything if someone doesn't feel like they belong.
Right.
And they don't then feel vulnerable enough to give their very best. They don't want to rock the boat. And so that doesn't, that doesn't help either that team member or the broader team, the collective organization. So when you create a community where someone feels like they truly belong, and I've been blessed to be part of some really, really great ones, with the Cheesecake Factory being arguably among the best, Pizza Hut when it was owned by PepsiCo, great organization where we really had a community feel, and we worked our butts off, but we felt fulfilled in how we were living our purpose at both work and life.
Right.
Connecting those two, to me, are a much more fulfilling objective than just pulling a shift and getting paid every other week.
And I think what's interesting is I've noticed that people who stay in the role that they're in, first off, I think, and this might be a bit of a sidebar, they say they don't really have a choice, which is not necessarily true. Everything's a choice. They're just making that choice, right? But it's like again, quiet quitting. You're talking about quiet quitting is not new. No. People are like, oh, quiet. It's, I mean, you could argue that it's the bare minimum. It's phoning it in, but that's happened forever. And it's not necessarily, by the way, it's not necessarily a community or cultural thing. Sometimes it's just the person that just that's not their job is to go in. They want to make money so they can spend time with their family. I have a friend who, by the way, still works for Costco. Great guy, was a groomsman at my wedding. He is a forklift driver. He got promoted to forklift driver when he moved to the Costco that we work at, that he works at now. Still sometimes even though it's been 15 some odd years since I worked at Costco, almost 20, I still sometimes go into that mindset because I was there for a long time and it was fulfilling work. He has been offered promotions, et cetera, et cetera. He is quite happy to work his early morning forklift shift, get on the forklift, do it. Why? Because he wants to spend time with his family, and that's it's a means to an end for him. And there's going to be that. What's fascinating to me is when those that want more or feel like they are they don't get it. They don't, because the company or the corporation is so driven by something else that eventually it drains those individuals out. I know lots of people that have worked for organizations that stick around for a long time. They move up. And eventually that purpose, that fulfillment dries up. So how does an organization, or even if you're running a smaller business, or even if yourself, how do you try to sustain that level of fulfillment, that community over the long haul as much as possible? Because I think that I know it can ebb and flow, but I think the propensity to go, especially when you have somebody new come in and go, okay, well, it's now about the bottom line, or it's about the shareholders or what have you.
Mm.
How do you quote balance that? How do you create harmony that's going to allow for that kind of stuff to still maintain and sustain over the long haul?
Yeah, you used a great word of harmony and balance. And I think that is the key within this L.E.A.F growth model. It is 4-circle Venn diagram where they overlap, right?
Right.
And there's a balance to it. But you have to start with leadership. And if you go back to that metaphor of a plant or a tree, let's say, leadership represents the seed and the root system. So if you know much about trees, I don't know a whole lot. I've learned a lot since researching and writing this book. But like an oak tree has a root system that splays out underground that is at least the width, if not more, than its canopy. Mm. Well, that's how they grow strong and tall, right? So if you have strong leadership in an organization, I break that down into 4 C's. Clarity of your purposeful vision, mission, and values, right? That's got to be at the very foundation. And those have to be unwavering, and they have to be inspirational for people. But then you have to connect them to your business priorities. And you use the word shareholder. Well, I believe we should call them stakeholders, and I believe there are 4. Mm-hmm. Okay, they're your team members, right? They've got to be bought in. They're your customers, clients, guests, the end user of your product or service. They will feel good, as I mentioned, switching to higher purpose brands and paying more for them. And then there are your business partners, which could be shareholders if you're publicly traded, but they could be franchisees or whatever you're in your business ecosystem, whoever, distributors, suppliers, et cetera. And they have to know what you stand for so they can support you with their resources. And then there are your communities. They could be your local community where you do business. It could be your country or it could be around the world. But when team members feel like they're plugged in, as I just mentioned with the science of purpose research, it has a higher level of retention and tenure because they feel like they're part of a community that allows them to be part of something bigger than just themselves.
Right. And
when you have that community and it's well established and people feel like they're a part of it, they're not just seeing, the vision or mission statements on a wall and saluting as they walk by, but they're seeing that firm live it every day. That's how you can sustain the community feel longer. And people would be like, yeah, I could get a couple bucks an hour more, or maybe, if you're in the corporate world, X thousand more somewhere else, but why would I leave this?
Right.
And if I get growth opportunities, right? If they don't just stick me in the same job and I have opportunities to learn and grow, now I'm feeling like I'm growing at work while I'm able to now grow outside of work.
Let's talk about the idea of, you talked about like slowing, like when you saw that fig tree leaf, that was a moment of like slowing down and just not, I find, and I'm going to link to another episode that we talked about nature and getting into nature with Darren, I'll link to it in the show notes. But this idea of, I think and this again goes back to this idea of productivity versus productiveness, this pace, this speed, this desire to just go, fast, now. When you hear about growth, that it's almost like the qualifier, the purposeful part, people are like, but that's going to take too long. It doesn't seem like, again, it's that quality thing. Like, well, wait a minute, we need to do this in the next 30 days, not in the next 30 years. Right. Like, cause there's this mindset of like, I want it now, not I'm willing to wait for it. Right. So how do you keep those that are in that role of building the community and sustaining it from falling prey to this go, fast, now idea of growth? Again, let's use the metaphor of the weed versus the tree.
Yeah.
You ever garden, you know what grows faster than anything else? It's the damn weeds. And they're the ones that are choking everything else out, right?
Yeah.
And then
absolutely.
There's other elements to which it's also fascinating when you think about, and I look at this book by Henry Cloud called Necessary Endings, right? The idea of the rose bush. Sometimes you got to prune roses that could grow so that the other ones can flourish, right? So so there's all of that to keep in mind when you're talking about it in the idea of business, where you've got these people running, you're like, this just seems so hard. So why can't we just do it this way? But we know inherently that it's not the best way. Why? How do we keep from falling back on those bad habits or those bad concepts or ideals?
Well, I think, it's a well-worn adage is people don't lead companies, they lead bad managers. And so it comes back to the leader of an organization or a division to really balance that idea. Yeah, we have to get the work done. At the end of the day, we've got our goals to hit, but how do I create an environment where, you don't feel like you're on a treadmill. You feel like you're, walking and, getting the craftsmanship of the quality of work done while we still can get the widgets out the door. And I think there's a bit of an art and science to it, but it really comes down to relationships. Again, we're all human. And if you have a team leader who is more humanistic and has a more empathetic leadership style versus just command and control, you're going to relate better and you're going to want to work for them and deliver your best quality of work for them.
Right.
But also taking back that idea of who you serve. You also remember we're whole people. So it's spiritual, relational, personal, and professional. So go back to the personal part. You have to know yourself. There are some people that are wired to be go, go, go all the time. Mm-hmm. They're the hare in the tortoise and the hare story, right? Yep. And there's some people that are very plodding and thoughtful and deliberate, but they come up with great ideas. And they may be the tortoise in that. You need both. You need a blend of them. Right. And you have to figure out who you are and what resonates most with your style. And you have to be able to be open and honest with your leader as to what motivates you. So if you have that and they have a listening ear, back to that idea of listen and observe, value and empower, the love idea, then you're going to have the ability to balance the idea of productiveness with quality craftsmanship and professionalism.
Do you think it's also, and again, I go back to the Costco idea of less is more in a lot of ways. They don't have nearly as much stock in there. I mean, look at even, and again, I have obviously some experience in the food service industry. Yeah. Look at like In-N-Out, Five Guys. Like, we only have these menu items and this is what we have. And I think in some instances that allows for that to thrive, as opposed to we've got to add this and this and this to the menu. And again, to your point, I guess I just answered my own question. Who are you serving? What are you serving? Like, what's the, right?
Well, you start with who are you too. I mean, again, I worked as chief marketing officer for the Cheesecake Factory with over 300 menu items, almost all made fresh from scratch. Spoiler alert, the cheesecake is not made fresh in the restaurant. It's brought in from two different facilities across, the U.S. But it's amazingly complex. But who they are is a very over-the-top, immersive dining experience. Yeah. And they get the guest check. They get people waiting an hour and a half in line because you want that full-on experience versus a In-N-Out. And they've got, a couple different items and they've got lines out the door, right? Yep. So you have to know who you are and who you serve. And then your complexity needs to be removed so you can accomplish that to the best of your ability.
So it's interesting as we get close to wrapping up here, having ran food courts in 3 different Costco's, either, as the guy who had a lot of experience or ultimately as the leader, Jim Sinegal, the old CEO of Costco, that would be the place he would stop. So interestingly, when I was working in all those buildings, the warehouse manager, that was the most, I would say, intense time that they would pay attention to that department was before a building opened. Or if Jim was coming, because Jim would invariably pay a trip to the food court. And if the food court was running well, then he'd be like, okay, well, this is indicative of how this building is running. Because he knew that it was the one that was kind of like the afterthought, right? Yeah. And I remember, I've heard stories, I don't know this for sure, but from colleagues that when Jim stepped down, he told the new CEO that if you ever change the price of the hot dog and soda pop, I will expletive kill you. And that's a story I've heard. I don't know. I can't corroborate if it's true or not. Maybe I'm paraphrasing, but the idea of knowing he was, I mean, I loved just interacting with him because, and in my brief interactions, because some of his adages he would say is pursuit of perfection is stupid. We want excellence. You know, he was very grounded, and he's still involved. Obviously, he's got the winery and stuff that they still do, but he got it. And he was a leader that we all bought into. Like when you watched him present, he got it, and he paid his team. Costco's invariably known for paying their employees very well, great benefit packages. So I think that was a good example. And when I interviewed Michael Gerber, we were talking about the idea of the E-Myth. He goes, Costco's a good example of turnkey. Like they knew, like once you know what that is, that's why Costco, like you go into Costco and you want to buy some ketchup, you're buying Heinz because that's all they serve. And then you've got three options: small packets, big can, 3-pack. You don't like that? Don't like Heinz? You're not buying ketchup. But what you will buy are those jeans that are on sale because we didn't, again, decision fatigue. We didn't enforce your decision, we didn't put so much overwhelm on you that you were able to, the decision fatigue wasn't a factor. Cheesecake would be, the thing is, for the Cheesecake Factory, you're going there for cheesecake. Like, you're going to, yes, you're going to have to choose which one you want, but guess what?
There's only 30 varieties.
Right. But if you want to go for cheesecake, what is the first thing that's going to come to mind? The Cheesecake Factory. That's where you're going to go, right? If you're going to go to Pizza Hut, where you want pizza, well, Pizza Hut serves pizza, right? And they do it damn well. So I guess as I'm getting close to wrapping up here is this idea of not losing sight of that. Not the power of you stopping and looking at that fig tree, or thinking about like those bigger picture ideas of like the LOVE acronym, like this idea of pausing, of slowing down, which seems anti-productive or counterproductive, but it's some of the most productive things that we can do, not just in a leadership role, but I think when you're in the trenches too. Like, it's okay to, take a pause, take a beat, because it's going to help you make a better decision and serve those who you're meant to serve, right?
Yeah, we had a phrase. It was, go slow to go fast.
Yeah.
Right. So I think Pablo Picasso was quoted as saying, inspiration exists, but it must find you working. So the point is, you got to keep your eyes open, your ears open. You got to ask a lot of questions, and be curious. And if you are, then all of a sudden these patterns and possibilities will come to you, as this one did, because I allowed myself the space and the time to see something in a different way. So we all have heard the phrase, sometimes we can't see the forest through the trees.
Right.
Well, it's true. We get so caught up in the weeds that we don't give ourselves the space and the time to be able to see things through a different lens. And when we do, we're often able to see something more clearly and build upon the beauty of something that may exist and make it even better.
So, Mark, as we wrap up, first off, the book is called The Purposeful Growth Revolution: 4 Ways to Grow from Leader to Legacy Builder. Where can people pick up the book, and where can people learn more about how to develop their purpose and make sure they're growing in a purposeful way? I know you've got an assessment and stuff on your website that you want to share.
Yeah, that's great, Mike. First of all, the book is available in Kindle ebook or hard cover or paperback on Amazon. And again, it's The Purposeful Growth Revolution: 4 Ways to Grow from Leader to Legacy Builder. And it's Mark A. Mears. And then you can go to my website at markamears.com. And as you mentioned, Mike, right there on the homepage, you can take a free Purposeful Growth self-assessment. It takes about 5-6 minutes, but when you've completed it, you can immediately download a customized report with your results. And so look at this as a benchmark to see where you stand on this concept of purposeful growth, not only in your own life, but maybe in the organization that you work in, right? And so it goes through the 4 sections of my book. And then also, I would love it if you would link in with me and we can connect and keep our dialogue going. I'd love to get acquainted with your listeners and learn from them as well.
Mark, thanks so much for taking the time today to have a productive conversation with me.
I thought it was very productive, Mike. I really appreciated you and your perspective. And thanks again for allowing me to come on as your guest.
Big thanks to Mark for joining me for this conversation. You can find all of the relevant links, show notes, all that stuff at productivityist.com/podcast493. And what's really good is if you're using a podcast app right now, you've already see those show notes in front of you, but you may not have subscribed to the podcast yet. If you want to find past episodes really quickly and you want to make sure you don't miss a single episode of what's to come, then I encourage you to subscribe to the podcast, whether you're using Spotify, Apple Podcasts, what have you. What have you also done to support the show? Well, what you can do is you can check out the sponsors that you heard on today's episode. Just go to productivityist.com/podcast sponsors to make that happen. I'm about to make the end of the show happen. So thanks so much for joining me this time around. Until next time, I'm Mike Vardy, the host of A Productive Conversation, reminding you to stop doing productive and start being productive. See you later.